All right. So, hi, Eric.
Hi, Maggie. How you doing?
Pretty good. Today, we're talking about what?
Today, there was an interesting article that came recently. I saw about obesity in the third world. You know, for a long time, United States, we've had an obesity problem, but now, and the rest of the world, it wasn't so much. But now it's ballooning in the developing world. It's gone up 3 times what it was before. We're still number 1 in America. We're still leading the pack. It's not a good thing, but doing it. But it's saying by 2050, they may very well be where we are now, or even catch up to us. So it's going to be a worldwide problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious what the cause of this is. But what do you think? What do you think is the cause of it?
I think one of the big causes is all the processed food.
Yeah.
You know, they're starting to adopt the American diet, the typical American diet, which is, as we know, terrible for us. You know, the McDonald's is on every. I know when I go overseas now, I feel like I'm back to the United States. There's McDonald's, there's Kentucky Fried Chicken, there's Burger King on every corner, and you know, before they were protected because they were more agrarian and they would grow their own food, and then they would eat it right there, and it was also fresh. Well, now they're getting away from that because they're becoming more industrialized, more advanced, quote unquote. Like us, and they're suffering the same
But I mean,
consequences
really,
now.
even within the processed food, you know, I'm very much against genetically modified organisms where they, and perhaps you're not, but
I'm not.
I'm very much against it because I think that our bodies are not able to assimilate and digest those foods easily. And I think that's what happens. That's why people balloon. And I mean, the other day I was doing some errands, and I had to buy some protectors for my son's music, these plastic things that you put the music in because he's, you know. And I happened to be driving by a Walmart, and I hate to shop at Walmart, but I said, okay, it's late and it's still open. So I went in, and it was a very poor neighborhood, and everybody looked swollen. It wasn't like they were just fat. They literally looked inflamed and swollen, and to me, that's a sign of so many toxins in the body, and the body doesn't know what to do with it, and it's beyond fat. You know, it's not just being fat and having, you know, your waist is thicker or whatever. It's the whole body. They look as if you touch them and they're going to, that it's hard, you know, and it's puffy. It's weird.
Yeah, like this picture that I was looking at. But I mean, it's one issue, the toxins in the body, and the GMO you're saying, which is another subject. I think more important, though, is the actual diet itself, as far as are you eating fast food, heavily processed foods, or something that is in its natural state, unprocessed. To me, that's more important than worrying about GMO and the other toxin things, which is not necessary. Which actually, there's 2 different things. I agree with you on the toxin thing.
But I think GMOs are toxins.
I'm totally. I want GMO actually, and I love the way that we have processed. I mean, not processed it. You know, we've been doing it for thousands of years. GMO. When someone they like a certain characteristic of a certain plant, and
That's
they
different.
do more of that,
But
and that's a natural. But it takes hundreds and hundreds of years to do it.
Mendel was doing that.
But
You know,
now
this whole
we
crossbreeding.
we can actually direct it. We can actually change it ourselves.
But that they're not
And yeah,
doing it. They're not doing it in a way that's beneficial to humanity. They're doing it in order to make more profits for themselves. For example,
Disagree.
they have apples.
part.
They can GMO apples so that the apple can be a year or more old and it still looks fresh. Now, how much nutritional value is going to be in that apple if it's over a year old?
Hey, no question, it's going to be less nutritional value, but it's
Nothing.
my
It'll have
point
no
is
nutritional value.
yes, it will.
Because
It'll
it's
still have
basically
plenty.
dead.
It'll still have plenty of nutrition, and that's going to be a whole lot better than eating some French fries. Is my point. I would agree with you that it's not quite as good.
You know why it isn't? Because it has no nutritional value. The body is going to be starving. The body is going to be starving for nutrients. You can eat that apple, and it's going to be worthless in your body.
Are you going to tell me that apple has less than eating a bunch of fries or something? Of course not.
I'm not saying
the
it has
apple's
less.
going to be better than eating that.
You know, apples and oranges here. Because
well, that's my point. That people are eating French fries and hot dog and hamburgers at McDonald's. If I can get them to eat an apple, they're going to be a lot healthier whether that apple is a GMO or not.
You know what? They're
is my
choosing
point.
the French fries because they have very little money. The economy is
Yes,
terrible.
I
They
agree.
don't have many choices. That was another thing that I saw at Walmart, that people's carts, they weren't full, but the things that they had in their carts were very cheap things because they have limited
Absolutely.
budgets. Maybe they're on food stamps or whatever, and they're buying crap.
I agree, and that is a big part of the
It's
problem.
terrible.
And our government is helping this by people eat crap because they subsidize all the farmers that are making all this processed food, and they make it so cheap.
Corn and
you're absolutely right.
soybeans,
They have no
GMO.
other, and that's the problem. And which I support anyway. So that is a real problem with the government, and they did it years ago. Actually, I think they had good intentions because back when and this is years ago when everybody was on the farm, that they wanted to help because starvation, particularly during the Great Depression in the 30s, was a real problem. And they said, well, if we subsidize, people would have at least basic food to eat. But of course, they've kept those laws today when we don't need them. And now, yes, it's the food. You know, we're subsidizing that hamburger and those French fries at McDonald's and Burger King and all the others. When we don't subsidize the healthy stuff, you know, apples or greens and all these other things. But anyway, and the point is with this article, again, that's now come to the third world as well.
Where
not just
they're
the United
actually
States.
now GMOing rice, you know, and all kinds of things, and I think this is contributing.
Which again, I think GMO is good because
No, it
before
isn't.
half the crop would die and then people would die of starvation. Whereas now they're able to
You know,
get
that's
much
the
greater
argument.
yields.
That's the argument
Yes.
of Monsanto and all these
Yes.
other
And it's a
food.
good one.
But mainly, what they want to do is sell pesticides because that's their main business.
Well, pesticides, I agree with you, is not good. But here's what we're doing with GMO. GMO, they're saying, hey, we can genetically modify it, so we don't even need pesticides a lot of times because they'll be able to resist
But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that the bugs are becoming super bugs, the pests, and they're resistant
Well-
to the pesticides and the GMOs in the plant.
But
That are a lot of these plants
I'm
are
not
producing their
disagreeing
own.
with that.
Do you like the fact that plants that we're eating are producing their own pesticides internally? Because that's one of the things that they're doing with GMOs.
Yeah, well, they're doing well.
So we're eating
You know,
pesticide producing
plants
plants
naturally do that anyway.
that we can't digest, so it sits in our intestine, creating, you know, who knows, creating pesticides inside of us.
It's not a perfect science, I'll be the first to say, but
But
it's a
we
lot
are-
better than what
but
we
you
had
know what?
before
We
when
are
people
not-
were dying of starvation.
But we are not
That's my
science
point.
experiments, and nobody has
Yeah.
determined what will happen to us because of this GMO stuff, what will happen to
Yes.
us in 10, 20, 30 years. I think this is one of the reasons that obesity is ballooning in the developing world.
I think the much bigger reason is because people are eating processed foods, regardless of GMO or non-GMO. And if you look at a meta-analysis, there's not data. I mean, you can point to a study that says yes, GMO is bad for you, but there's plenty of others that say it has no effect. And so you look at the meta-analysis, which is a study of the studies
There are many
that show that it doesn't really show a pattern.
There
Some
are
say
many
yes, some
scientists
say
that
no.
don't work for these huge corporations that are against GMOs. I mean, that's
And there's
this
plenty
is a
of other
growing
independent
movement.
ones that I have seen that
Well,
show that there's
I'd
not
like-
any
Okay, well,
difference.
that'll be our next topic.
That'll be a fixed topic.
Okay. Thank you.